Hello and welcome back. Today I'll be going through the Palo Alto Network's PAN-OS platform. To get started, our objectives are to import the PAN-OS CPM platform, which we'll download from the marketplace. We'll also add in the PAN-OS PSM connection component, which is also found in the marketplace. We'll then focus on using the CPM to manage the Palo Alto PAN-OS local accounts. And then we'll use the PSM to connect to the PAN-OS using the local accounts for SSH and Web. And then we'll pivot to using the PSM again to connect to the PAN-OS using Active Directory managed accounts for both SSH and Web. And then finally, we'll use the PSMP to connect to PAN-OS local accounts via SSH. What we'll need is a firewall, of course. We'll also need to go to the marketplace and get the CPM Palo Alto PAN-OS platform. And we also need the connection component that we used last time in the last video, which was the PSM for Palo Alto Networks. Before we proceed, I'll remove everything that we did in the last video. So I'll go to Platform Management. We'll expand out the Windows platform. We'll edit this. We'll expand out UI and Workflows, Connection Components, and we'll delete these two here. Apply that. Okay. I'll then go to Configuration Options, and in Configuration Options, we'll go to Connection Components, and then we'll remove these three connection components, and I'll start again. Now that we have that all cleaned up, we'll create two safes. So we'll go to Policies and Safes here, and we'll go Create Safe. The first safe will be for the network firewall reconcile account. Typically, you would add in a AD group or a role to this safe, but I'm going to press skip and create safe and work out the permissions later. And the second safe will be for the super user on the firewall. So I hit skip and create safe there as well. So if I search for net_firewall, we can see there's two safes I've created, and I'll work out the permissions on that later. For now, I'll just leave my account full access to these two safes. I'll now head back to Platform Management and we'll go Import Platform. So as I said earlier, I've already downloaded the plugin version 2.1 for the Palo Alto Networks, which was this page here. So that's where I downloaded that. If I expand out Network Device, we can see that here. I just press the three dots and go Manage PSM Connections. And we'll point this at Connector Server 1. And we'll hit save. I'll duplicate this platform and I'll give it a name. Hit create. I'll now deactivate the original platform. That way, if I ever wanted to go back to factory defaults or platform defaults, I would find them here. I'll go back to the accounts view and I'll onboard two accounts. So this will be network device, the platform we just created, and we'll start off with a reconcile account. And we'll add this account. I'll add a second account. This time it'll be the super user account. And I'll head to the all accounts view here. And I'll favorite these two accounts. So I'll head back to the favorites again, and I can see the accounts I'm interested in. To start off with, I'll verify these two accounts. While we're waiting for the two accounts to verify, I'll go to Administration, then Platform Management. We'll expand out Network Device here, and we'll edit this platform. So if I go to Automatic Password Management, Password Change, we'll set this to yes. To perform periodic change. We'll do the same with password verification. So we can perform periodic verifications. We'll go down to generate password. By default, it's 15 characters. I'm going to set this to 20 because typically we find password policies on firewalls are higher than 15 characters. So I'll apply that. And finally, I want to touch on the additional policy settings here. And in particular, this setting here, change password in reset mode. Other box, when you download this from the marketplace, this is set to yes. And the reason for this is that sometimes there's accounts on firewalls that can't change their own password because of their permissions. So what this means is when you press change, it actually wants to use a reconcile account. I'll show you both reasons on why you'd leave this default and why you might change this to no. I'll leave it default to yes for now, just so you can see an error shortly. And we'll hit OK. I'll go back to the accounts view and I'll select the reconcile account and we can see it's been verified. I'll do the same for the super user and we can also see that's been verified. Now on the super user or the reconcile, they've got the same permissions on the firewall, but if I hit change and go and restart the CPM service, so back on the workstation, I can see that this account has failed to change, and that's because we haven't assigned a reconcile account. So there's two ways we can fix this. I can either assign a reconcile account, or I could go back into the platform and set that to no. I'll show you both methods. So we'll go back to the platform, and we'll go to network device, and we'll edit the platform. So under additional policy settings, I'll set this back to no. We'll apply that and hit OK. And we'll go back to the accounts view and we'll press change again. I'll head back to the connect to server 1 and restart the password manager to speed things up. And we'll refresh here. And we can see that it's been checked out by the prod CPM, which is great. And about 30 seconds later, we can see that this account has been rotated, which is great. I'll go back to the platform management. And we'll set the platform back to the defaults. So back in the accounts view, I'll click on this super user account, go to the details tab and go to the linked account section here, and I'll link the reconcile account. There it is there. And on the reconcile account, I'll do the same by linking the super user. So I'll start with a super user account. If I hit change now, and we'll hit change again, and I'll restart the service back on connect to server 1. And if I hit refresh, we can see it's been checked out by the CPM. So what's actually happening right now, when I press change, it's actually using the reconcile account to change the password because of that default setting on the platform. So it's about 30 seconds later again, and we can see it's been changed here. So I'll go over to the reconcile account and I'll hit change and change again. And now I'll head back to the CPM server, or connect to server 1, and I'll restart the service. So I've refreshed. As we can see, it's checked out by the prod CPM. And what's happening right now, I pressed change there before, and what it's actually doing is using the reconcile linked account to change the password. So again, it's about 30 seconds later and it's changed that password. The CPM has changed the password. So that's great. We've used the verify function and the change password function to manage these accounts. I'm going to press the connect button, and at the moment it's only got SSH here. So I'll select that and we'll hit connect. So that looks like it's working. I'm logged on. We can type in commands. And I'll close this. That's great, the SSH is working. We now need to get the web interface working for Palo Alto. So I'll come back to Platform Management, Network Devices, and we'll go to Manage PSM Connectors here. We'll add a package here, and we'll select the Palo Alto Networks. This package here was found under the PSM for Palo Alto Network. So I'll hit Save on that. And now I'll head to Configuration Options here, and we'll expand our connection components. And as we can see, the Palo Alto is found down here. There's a few things that we want to fix out of the box here. So the first thing is we want to make this full screen. We'll apply that. We'll go to Target Settings here, and then Web Form Settings. The Enforce Certificate Validation, we'll set that to No, because I'm using a self-signed certificate. We'll go to User Parameters here, and as you can see, there's no HTML5 gateway set. We did do that earlier in the video series. If we look at the PSM RDP and allow select HTML5 is here, and I did this also on the PSM SSH. So they're both set the same, so I'll copy this. So you can right click, copy. I'll go back down to here and paste it under User Parameters in the Palo Alto Web. If we look at the target settings and client specific here, we don't have the browser path or enable trace set here. I'll do that now. So I'll copy this from the Azure portal. We'll copy the enable trace here. Paste that here as well as the browser path. Because in the last video I showed you that we're using the 64-bit version of Chrome, put in the appropriate path, I'll hit apply. And the enable trace I'll set to yes. I'll explain what this means shortly. When we have this set to yes, we can see the login process. And finally, I'll set the lock application window. I'll set this to no. And I'll hit apply on that. And we'll hit OK. I'll go back to the accounts view and I'll go to connector server 1 and we'll restart the PSM service, Privileged Session Manager. We'll restart that so that those changes are applied. Back on the workstation, I'll try and use the super user account to connect to Palo Alto Web and we'll hit connect. As we can see, that's entering in the details. And as we can see here, there's a validation issue. I'll show you how that's resolved shortly. To fix the validation issue, I'd like to show you how CyberArk logs into a system. If we go back to configuration options, connection components, and the Palo Alto Web here, we'll go to target settings, then web form settings. So this web form field instructs CyberArk on how to log into an application. So I'll just copy the password for this CA super user. Before I enter in the credentials, I'll just show you the inspect procedure here. And as we can see here, the ID for the user input box is called user. I'll do the same for password. I'll inspect that. And as we can see, that is the ID is passwd. I'll just type in some entries here. And if we inspect the login button, that is called submit. So if we go back to the privileged cloud, we saw user was the username, passwd was the password field, and submit was the login button. What's failing is the validation here. So let's log in as the user. And now that I'm logged in, if I right click on this commit button and go inspect, we can see the button ID for the commit button is ext-gen60. If I go back to Privilege Cloud, we can update the validation here or duplicate this. In my case, I'm just going to put a 0 on the end. But from time to time, vendors will update their application, the look and feel, and how the web developers change the actual interface. And that's why sometimes the plugins are out of date or don't quite work anymore. So I'll hit OK on that, then I'll apply it, and OK again. I'll go back to connect to server 1 and restart the PSM service. And in the accounts view, we'll try the Palo Alto Web again. And that's logged in successfully. You would have noticed that during that login process, we could see the username and password being entered. So we'll go back to Privilege Cloud and we'll go to configuration options again. Go to client specific here, and under enable trace, we'll set this to no, which is the default setting. So again, I'll hit apply on that and OK. And once again, I'll restart the service. Back on the workstation, I'll connect again. And as we can see here, we've got this loading bar. This tells us the enable trace is set to no. And the reason for this is so that we can hide the username and password fields so that the PSM session is secured, so nobody can quickly look at what the password is that was entered by clicking on the little peak symbol. So as we can see, the validation must have passed because we got to this screen, and the network administrator can now use the Palo Alto here. So of course we're using local accounts. Next I'll show you how we can do it for domain accounts. So our goal is to get the Palo Alto in this menu here. The way I like to do it is we'll go to configuration options first, connection components, and we'll duplicate this connection component. So we'll copy that, paste it here, and we'll call it Palo Alto Web -domain -domain here. So the next thing we need to do is go to the target settings here, and then web form settings. In the web form settings, we've got the variable here of address. That won't work for an Active Directory user because the address of an Active Directory user is, in my case, cybrad.au. Now that won't be pointing at the firewall, so we can either hard code this to the firewall, which poses another problem. You might have more than one Palo Alto firewall. In my case, I'm going to pretend that I've got multiple Palo Alto firewalls, and we'll enter in PSM remote machine. So we'll hit apply on that. And we'll go to user parameters and right click here and we'll go add parameter. We'll call this PSM remote machine, and I'll give this a display name of firewall host name. And we'll click apply and OK. So now that we've created that connection component, we need to assign it to this platform, otherwise we don't see it here. So if I go to administration, then platform management, we'll go to Windows and we'll click on manage PSM connectors. I'm going to change this to connector server 1 for now, and I'll test with that first. And I'll search for Palo, and there we are with the Palo Alto Web domain. Associate that and hit save. And back in the accounts view, we can see the Palo Alto Web domain here now. This won't work right now unless we wait 10 minutes or we restart the PSM service. So I'm connected to server 1, I'll restart the service. And back on the workstation, we'll make a connection to the Palo Alto Web. Here it's asking us for the firewall hostname. I'll enter that now. Of course, if you're an organization that has multiple firewalls, this is why I did it this way, so you can choose the firewall you want to connect to. And as we can see, this is connected successfully, and we're logged in as brad.admin down here, which is the Active Directory account. Now that we've got the brad.admin account working with the Palo Alto Web, I'll now also show you how you could do SSH with a Active Directory account to the Palo Alto. We'll start off with administration, then configuration options. We'll go to connection components. We'll start off by duplicating the PSM SSH. And we'll give this a name. And we need to give this also a display name. We'll expand this out and we'll go to user parameters here, and we can see we've got the HTML5 gateway set, which is great. We also need to go back to the web one here that we created just before, and we'll copy the PSM remote machine. So we've got this here so that we can enter in the firewall hostname that we want to connect to when we press connect. We'll apply that. And then we'll go to target settings here, and we'll go to client specific. And we'll right click here and go add parameter. And we'll call this client app. And the value will be this. So basically what's happening here, we're using PuTTY to SSH to the username. At the PSM remote machine is what we enter in, and then it will fetch the password. I'll now go to platform management. Go to Windows, and we'll click on the three dots here and go manage. Type in Palo, and we can see the Palo Alto SSH domain. Hit save. We'll go back to the accounts view. And before we can test, I'll go back to connector server 1 and restart the service. Back on the workstation, we'll select the Palo Alto SSH. And we'll connect to the firewall. As we can see, that's connected successfully. Now that we have that working, I'll now focus on the PSMP or PSM for SSH use case. So I'll go to administration, then platform management, and we'll go to the network device, and we'll go and manage the PSM connections for the Palo Alto platform, and we'll search for PSMP, and we'll select the PSMP SSH. Save that. And we'll go back to accounts view. Because we just made a change to the configuration, I'll need to restart the service on PSMP 1. I'll just connect to that now. And we'll type in sudo service PSMP srv restart. Now, of course, we didn't have to do this. We could have simply waited 10 minutes. The configuration is refreshed every 10 minutes. Before I can test the connection, we'll go to PSM for SSH MFA caching. And I'll generate a SSH passphrase. And that will help us generate the keys. I'll download the SSH key. And we can do a shift right click here and copy as path. And I'll open up the terminal and we'll run this command here. We'll put in the SSH passphrase. and we can see it's connected. Before recording this video, I did have an issue here when connecting the first time via the PSMP, and it's got this error here, no matching host key type found. The PSMP is quite strict with its host key matching. So on the firewall, I did go to this section here under device and created this SSH management profile. This isn't necessarily best practice, but this is what I did to get it working in my lab. And then we go to setup here, and then you define that down the bottom here, the SSH management profile setting here. Anyway, I just thought I'd add that just in case anyone got stuck with it. And I'll finish the video here. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.